WWE Raw 2 is the follow-up to last year's WWF Raw for the Xbox. That game marked the debut of Anchor, the developers of Ultimate Fighting Championship for the Dreamcast, in the wrestling game business. The game kind of fell short of expectations. The gameplay felt really rushed and just sort of sloppy all in all. There really weren't very many modes in the game, and it felt like a rushed product for the most part. It's like 18 months later, and Raw 2 is now out, and to be perfectly honest, the game still feels kind of rushed and sloppy, and there's still some pretty major problems with the game. There is a lot of new stuff in the game. Most notably, all the different match types that you can find in SmackDown and WrestleMania are in Raw this year. You can do normal matches, Hell in a Cell, cage, ladder, TLC, hardcore, all the basic match types that you would expect from a wrestling game at this point. The Creator Wrestler mode this year is easily the best new aspect of the game. It's easily one of the best on the market as far as Creator Wrestler modes go. You can edit pretty much anything you want for a character. All the standard attributes, all the different appearance types. There's hundreds of moves in the game. Not quite as many as SmackDown has, but there's still a whole lot of moves to choose from. One of the big new additions to the Creator Wrestler is the ability to just customize your wrestler's entrance in a whole bunch of different ways. The game supports custom soundtracks, so you can upload your own songs from a CD onto the Xbox hard drive and use them for your theme songs. You can edit lighting schemes in different sections of the arena, so you'll have lettered sections like A, B, C, D, and E, and you can decide how you want the lights to flash, what color you want them to be, that sort of stuff. You can choose from any of the different pyros for your favorite wrestlers, or you can just there's some original ones you can choose from too. And there's just a whole lot of stuff you can do with it, and it really gives you a nice customizable feel for it. The big new mode addition this year is the season mode, which effectively lets you choose any of the current WWE superstars or any of your created players, and you can kind of enter him into this the season mode, which you can basically just go through the career of a WWE superstar. The way it works is that it's a sort of you start right before, or right after, rather, WrestleMania, and you kind of progress towards the next year's WrestleMania. It works on a month-by-month basis, and each month has 3 shows, one episode of Raw, one of SmackDown, and one pay-per-view event. Rather than just kind of going through and wrestling through and just trying to win the belts, there's some other stuff you can do. At the beginning of each show, you can kind of arrange the card and decide how you want to participate in each match. Do you want to run and interfere in this match? Do you want to walk up to another wrestler and kind of encourage him, give him, try to make him even be your manager, something like that? You can set traps for opposing wrestlers. Or you can just sit in the backstage area and just kind of rest. Overall, the gameplay is basically still the same. They have changed some of the functionality around a little bit, added a couple of things, moved a couple of things, removed a couple of things. Blocking, for instance, just doesn't exist in the game anymore. They've sort of replaced that with the dodge counter button. It's basically your only way to avoid attacks at this point. And the blocking system in last year's game didn't really work very well, so it's not such a bad thing that they took that out. One of the big problems with last year's game was the fact that the AI kind of did some really stupid stuff and was pretty prone to sort of buggy, glitchy behavior. In some instances, this is improved this year, but in a lot of others, it's still pretty bad. One thing is that now your opponents will just try to pin you repeatedly if it gets too late into a match. So, it's one thing to just kind of go for the pin if the time's running out. He'll do a move, then he'll try to pin you. Then when you kick out, he'll get up, he'll stomp you once, try to pin you again, and you won't have time to get up to get out of this. So basically what you either have to hope for is that A, time runs out, B, that something distracts him and makes him walk away, or C, there's an interference, someone runs in and stops the pinfall or anything like that. That's not going to happen all the time, and sometimes you'll get into these kind of lengthy loops of just getting pinned over and over and over again. The game's graphics are better overall, though it's not such a marked improvement that, it would show the 18 months of development time that have gone into it. All the player models do look a lot better, especially the top-tiered wrestlers like The Undertaker, The Rock, Steve Austin, Rob Van Dam, those guys. They look really detailed. They look a whole lot like their real-life counterparts, and some of the newer characters don't look quite as good. Rey Mysterio's mask kind of looks sort of plasticky, like it's just sort of been glued to his head. Goldberg's head looks like it's been smashed into a vise, and just overall he just doesn't really look anything like Goldberg. The game animates pretty well too. The animations aren't as realistic as say the SmackDown game, or really even in some ways the WrestleMania, but they do look like they're supposed to. They animate the way they're supposed to, and it's perfectly passable overall. Probably the worst aspect of the game's graphics are the clipping problems, which are extremely prevalent even for a wrestling game, because clipping is always a problem in wrestling games, but Raw 2's clipping is far and away the worst you'll ever see in any wrestling game. especially when you're outside of the ring, it's really bad. If you're performing like finishers or other moves and you're like too close to the ring, the dude's legs will just kind of like clip right through the ring as he's going by. It won't push you to the side like most games will. Sometimes you'll be in the ring, like if you're performing submission on a guy, and then if another guy gets knocked down on top of him, the two guys will actually intermingle into one another. It's a really unfortunate problem, and it is actually really obvious for the most part. All in all, Raw 2 has improved in certain areas. The Created Wrestler is really, really good. The season mode is a nice idea. It lets you do some cool stuff, and it does add some depth to the game. The problem is that the gameplay surrounding it is just not very good at all. And while these other features are really nice, if the gameplay that surrounds it isn't any good, then it's just sort of like those modes kind of are rendered meaningless in a way. Though, I mean, hey, if you were a fan of last year's WWF Raw, then there's no reason why you shouldn't like WWE Raw 2. If you're a more discerning wrestling game fan and you're not really that familiar with the Raw series, there are much better wrestling games out there. Last year's SmackDown, WrestleMania 19 for the GameCube, those are much better games. If you're really wanting a good wrestling game on the Xbox, unfortunately, Raw 2 just isn't it.